Hey everybody, it's February 12th, 2017, and this is your episode 81 of At Percussion. With me as always are Laurel Black.
Hi.
And Megan Arns.
Hello.
Ben, how's it going, buddy?
I'm doing well. I just had a long week getting back from TMEA.
Oh, that's right. Did you take your percussion ensemble?
Yeah, I did. We did 3 performances on the way, then we played at the convention.
That's awesome. What was the program?
Let's see here. We did a John Mackey piece called Damn for clarinet and percussion quartet.
Yep.
We did an excerpt of a piece by Zach Browning called Flying Tones for percussion quintet. We did, what else did we do? A new piece, 2 movements out of a new piece by David Pagel for trombone and percussion ensemble. And we closed with an excerpt of Mudra.
Hey, so we have 2 guests from the sub list today. They're sitting right next to me. We have Lucas Garner. This is his first appearance on the show. So, hey, Lucas.
Hey guys.
And back again, Caleb Pickering.
Hey.
So, you guys, joining us today is the Assistant Professor of Percussion Studies at Tennessee Tech University in Cookeville, Tennessee. He performs regularly with the Blue Hill Percussion Duo, which, Colin, isn't that with Brian Bloom?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
He also performs with the Bryan Symphony Orchestra and the Texas Tech University Faculty Jazz Combo. He endorses Innovative Percussion, Grover Percussion, Sabian Cymbals, Evans Drumheads, and Pearl Adams. So welcome, Dr. Colin Hill. How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. You're very welcome. What's life like for you right now? What's happening?
I think just like everybody else, it's busy. Right now we have about 19 percussion majors, so there's plenty to do at work. And then I try to do stuff on the side as much as possible. I play with Brian a lot. And my position's really great in that the faculty here plays a ton. So I get to play with our faculty jazz combo, which meets once a week to rehearse. And then we have a local orchestra called the Bryan Symphony Orchestra that's based out of Cookeville. But it's really the faculty and then 1 or 2 players from the School of Music as part of the section. And then we hire string players from Knoxville and Nashville, and that rehearses twice a week. So playing a lot, there's a lot of stuff going on with teaching, but also have 2 young kids at home, a 5-month-old and almost 3-year-old. So plenty of stuff to do. Yeah.
I have a kid at home. His name's Ben Charles. I have to take care of him. Spend a lot of time on the internet.
Feed him like twice a year.
You guys have a cat. That's like a kid, right?
I have to pay him. Oh yeah, the cat's crazy. Hey Colin, look what I have here. Do you see this?
Approved.
That's the
Oh, that's the contract.
Yeah, that's the thing that Faye helped me with.
Oh, awesome. I'm sorry that was such a pain.
No, well, that's what I wanted to tell you is it's not a pain at all. Like when you read it, it seems like, oh wow, this is really complicated and it's going to be tricky. It's something in the state of Tennessee where if you're a visiting guest artist or visiting lecturer or something, you just do this extra step about sales tax and you read about it in the contract and it sounds like, wow, what a headache. But yeah, Colin has a colleague there at Tennessee Tech that was just super, super helpful and spelled it out way clearly, and once I actually got started on it, it probably took 5 minutes.
Well, good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
I think there's been some guest artists in the past that have been more confused than you on that process, so I'm glad it worked out pretty well.
Oh, yeah.
When are you headed over there, Casey?
I should know that.
March 2nd.
Yeah, early
Cool.
March.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so looking forward to it. And Lucas, you studied under Colin for a year or 2? Or?
It was 2 years. It was his first year at Tennessee Tech, period, where he was adjunct. And then when he got the full-time gig, that was my last year at Tennessee Tech. So.
How are you enjoying Tennessee, Colin?
I love it. My wife and I are used to moving kind of all over the place for school, as you guys know how that goes. I grew up originally in Portland, Oregon. I went down to University of North Texas for my undergrad, where I met my wife.
And where you met me, more importantly.
Yeah, more importantly, I forget. And then moved to Bloomington, Indiana for my master's. I loved it there. My wife did not like the cold as much as I did. A Houstonian. So then we moved to Kentucky, Lexington for my doctorate, and we really loved Lexington. That was a hard place to leave. But Cookeville, it's small. I think there's like 30,000 people, about 12,000 at the university. So it's a small town. There's no Target, which was hard for my wife at first. With 2 young kids, it's a great place to raise a family. And we have new breweries coming in, good restaurants, so I can't complain.
It's funny you said raise a family and new breweries at the same time. Something for the kids to do.
Yeah,
that's right.
right.
Is your wife a musician, Colin?
She's not.
Okay.
She never really played any instruments growing up. She sings, in the car and in the shower. Loves music, mostly pop music, country music, but is not a trained musician in any way.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I think mostly a positive. At the beginning, it was a learning curve. Kind of understand what I do and what we do as musicians, but it's overall been very positive.
Cool.
Well, speaking of exactly that, we do have a Facebook question. This one's kind of a duo between Logan Ball and Brian Bloom, and it just speaks to how do you find time with your family, your kids, your work life, and your other hobbies. And it's the old balance question. How do you stay employed, sane, and married, as Brian Bloom puts it?
Well, I think a lot of it is right here in this cup. This is coffee.
Oh, I thought it was Jack.
Gin.
Yeah, I thought it was gin.
It's more correctly 4 years. But no, I think the biggest thing is, I hate to say it, but learning how to get less sleep was an important thing. Yeah. And I learned that in my doctorate. You said a balance. That's the biggest thing. But really balancing work and percussion with home life, I think, is the key. Because it's really easy for us to get totally consumed in what we do and want to spend endless hours because there's endless things to do. But now I have other priorities in my life. It's my family, my kids, my wife. They are the top priority. They don't always feel that way, and I'm sorry when that happens, but they are top priority. And so it's making sure I can be home at a decent hour, 5:30 in the afternoon, spend some good time with them, eat dinner with them, put them to bed, hang out with the wife for a little bit, and when she goes to bed around 10 p.m., then I come back to school and I get some stuff done. And so I usually come back most nights for a few hours, and then I try to get up early as I can and come in before work and get some stuff done. I think, the biggest thing is just figuring out how much sleep you can operate on and trying to go for that. I had a past student that told me that when he was in the Army, they got about 5 hours of sleep, and that's what they give the Army. I don't know if this is totally accurate, but this is what he told me. And so I figured if the Army expects their troops to function at a high level on 5 hours of sleep, I guess I can do that too. So that's kind of my goal each night, is 5 hours, and that's what I try to do.
And you find you can do that. Do you think this is something other people can learn to do?
I think so. I think your body adjusts. I really started kind of getting less sleep during my doctorate when I was working on my dissertation. I did kind of a crazy routine for about 2 months where I did an all-nighter, and then I slept for 2 nights in a row. And I did an all-nighter and slept for 2 nights in a row. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'm just one of those people that can function on little sleep, and think that works to my advantage.
I apologize for my colleagues distracting you in the chat window.
Oh, that's fine. Didn't even pay attention.
Oh, okay.
That's good. Don't.
It's definitely distracting everybody else. Well, Lucas,
I don't know if I could do it, you guys. I don't know if I can get used to 5 hours sleep a night. I don't know if I could do it. Maybe I shouldn't have kids for that reason.
I will say one thing that always strikes me, like just getting back from Team EA, and it happens at PASIC too, is I'm amazed, like when I go to these conferences, like I wake up at 7 a.m. every single morning, I go to something at 8 in the morning, I'm busy all day, and then I hang out with friends late at night, and I get to bed at like 1, and like I do it for like 4 or 5 days straight, and I feel fine the whole time I'm there. And then when I get back, like my days feel really short. And like I just had an exhausting week. And like today, it's like we started this at basically 3 o'clock. And it's like, wow, this is like one of the first things I'm actually accomplishing today. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like there is some merit to what Colin's talking about. Now, I couldn't do the all-nighters like he's talking about. But yeah, I think sometimes we can push ourselves in ways we didn't know.
Well, the thing that always blew my mind about what Colin does is like if he had a different job that wasn't the Tennessee Tech job, he would have absolutely been able to do like totally regular hours, like 9 to 5, and come home and like spend time with his family that way. But when Eric Willie left Tennessee Tech, he set like a really high bar for the percussion ensemble, like an extraordinarily high one. We were playing really, really hard stuff with all undergrads, no grad students whatsoever. And the way that he made it work, which I thought was really interesting, is he did percussion ensemble times like he did lesson scheduling. So he would get the lesson availability forms, and then when he had those, he would have the pieces already in mind for the semester, and he would schedule them based on the information from those lesson availabilities. So it would fit in every ensemble one ensemble per day throughout the entire week, and it was like the most efficient rehearsal schedule I've ever been a part of. It was amazing. So
Yeah, I think part of that comes out of necessity because, I mean, we have percussion ensemble according to the class schedule twice a week for an hour and 20 minutes. And as you guys know, that's not enough time to prepare an entire program, especially when you have to allow for setup and teardown time. It seems to work pretty well.
Is that coupled with you have the luxury of having like a good room that you can rehearse in, all the equipment's in there and all that?
Yeah, sort of. We have a percussion studio room that's large enough to fit most pieces. If it's, quartet, quintet, max kind of size, you certainly can't do, a 12-person piece in there. But that is where the equipment lives all the time. So, yeah, it works pretty well. So, I guess one more thing to tack on to the, having little hours and balance and stuff. One thing I've learned recently with my second child is learning to delegate a little bit of my responsibilities. I'm a perfectionist by nature, so I kind of want to control everything, but I'm starting to learn, that it's valuable for my students to learn these skills as well. The stuff that they can do and can learn from, I try to throw their way. You don't want to burden the students too much. They're busy as well. But learning, hey, what can my students kind of pick up and contribute to the studio has been helpful. And I think it makes them more invested in the studio as well when they feel like they have some ownership to it.
Totally.
On that note, like I mentioned earlier, Colin and I went to UNT together. And it was funny when I was reading Colin's dissertation, like so many of the people that he had interviewed were people that were at UNT when we were there. And at UNT, we very much learned from the graduate students, partially because a lot of us would take lessons with them, but also just they were sort of somewhere in between an undergraduate student and a professional faculty member, so they were sort of a level above us. So did you say your studio is undergrad only?
Yeah, we just have undergrads.
Yeah, and it's the same here. So could you talk about, because you don't have necessarily that level, I mean, you have upperclassmen and underclassmen, how the students interact and learn with each other?
Yeah, I think we have a really positive environment right now. It's being from North Texas, I totally agree, Ben. I think I probably learned more from my peers than I did from the professors. That's not taking away anything from the professors. They're great. I love my time there. People always say that in North Texas you don't get to spend quality time with the professors. That's not true, I don't think. But it was such a place where there's high caliber people, and we hung out a lot. And so I try to foster that environment here where we have a lot of studio hangs. So it's not just we're in the same classes and the same ensembles together, but we're friends and we feed off each other's skills and their drive and motivation. It's kind of like having a workout buddy. If you want to work out every day and you just work out by yourself, the mornings that you don't want to go to the gym are hard. But if you have somebody that's going to meet you there at 6 a.m., it's a lot easier to get your butt in there and do it. So we try to have a lot of events that we can get together and just be friendly and hang out. We usually do about 2 studio parties a semester at my house, one at the beginning, one at the end, just to really foster that environment. I think it's important.
I think that's so important too. Have you been there for 3 years now, Colin?
This is 3 years is the full-time guy, but my 4th year if you count the semester or the year I was adjunct.
Okay.
Yeah, my first semester here, actually first 2 semesters, I was here 2 days a week, Mondays and Wednesdays, and I was teaching lessons and drumline, some music appreciation, and some theory in the summertime. That was a rough year. I was commuting from Lexington.
How far of a drive is that?
It's 3.5 hours each way.
Wow. Yeah.
So I did
That's
that
a
for
lot.
I'm so tired.
Wow.
So
So now
about a guess that-
do you have someone who is doing that now?
Yes, and
That
I'm
position? Okay.
so thankful. When I got the tenure track position, I didn't have it. So for 2 years, it was just me, which was fine. But we got the funding back this fall semester.
Great.
So I have Marco Sharippa, who's finishing his doctorate at Indiana.
Cool.
Killer player, awesome guy. He's been helping out, and it's made me a better teacher because he hasn't had a university job, and I feel like it's partly my job to kind of show him what I do and show him my system, and so it keeps me on my game, and I love it. The students love him. It's a great situation.
Did Brian Mueller teach there?
He didn't. He teaches at MTSU.
Okay, got it. Then maybe I got
just down the
confused.
road.
Gotcha.
In Nashville. We're about an hour from there.
Gotcha. Maybe I just had that confused. So when you were hired as an adjunct, were they planning on Eric leaving, or was that just sort of coincidence that he left a year later?
Total coincidence. I just feel really fortunate. As you guys know, it's hard to get a job these days.
Yeah.
As a college professor, it's oversaturation of the market. So many great players, great teachers. It was just very lucky. I turned down a tenure track position 2 weeks before I got offered the adjunct position. It wasn't a good situation for me. It was in Iowa, really, really small school. Decided not to take it, really nervous about what I was going to do financially, and then just randomly got a call 2 weeks later from Eric, who I knew from North Texas, and it worked out. And then he got the job at Greensboro, and it just worked out. So I feel very fortunate that I'm here, have a job.
Yeah, wonderful.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There is one question, and well, I guess you've kind of talked about this a little already, but I wonder if you could elaborate maybe on specifics. Brandon Arve would like to know about your journey to TTU, speaking to the transition from doctoral student to what he's calling turning pro with a full-time job. I don't know if you have anything to add that would help that question.
I guess, you just got to put in your dues. You expect that you go to school for 11 years and you'll get a job right when your hard work will be rewarded. But it takes most people, a few years of doing really hard work and doing work in a lot of different areas to kind of piece it together. And so I think if you're just persistent and take as many opportunities that are offered to you, I try not to say no to anything, and just create really good relationships with people. I think our industry, we're fortunate that it's small, and that everybody kind of knows everybody. But if you're a dick, that works against you. You know what I mean? So you gotta be nice and want to be somebody that people want to call for a job. I think that's huge. It's really important.
If I could add one thing to that, just because I had a somewhat similar experience. Also, it's like when you get that adjunct job that might not be ideal, and John Park said this on his episode, like you have to treat it like it's a full-time tenure track position.
Yeah.
You can't give anything less because like that's your ticket to getting the full-time position. And even if you're driving 3.5, which is even more than I did, 3.5 hours to this job and you're exhausted, like you got to put on your game face and do a good job.
I totally agree, man. I totally agree. We have maybe 4 adjunct professors here at Tech, and I would say most of them aren't really that well known by the other faculty. Some are, because they've been here for a while. But at my other institution, too, I taught at Center College, and a lot of the adjuncts they didn't really know each other. They didn't really know the full-time faculty. And I think that's kind of a mistake. You don't want to be the guy that just pops in one day a week, a few hours, and teaches and then leaves. You want to kind of make your presence known and form relationships and act like you're a full-time faculty member.
Yeah, I've definitely seen both. The ones that you treat it very well and the ones that it's a gig. And I don't want to identify anyone on here because I don't want it to come back and bite me. But, oh, man, some of the adjuncts I've seen have been bad. And some have been very good, too. So.
Yeah, that is a tricky, but I think it's really good advice, and it seems like a lot of us here today, because I had a similar situation where I was driving 2.5 hours to Mansfield University when I was doing BMA, and I can totally relate to exactly what you guys are saying, and it's hard to do that every week, and it's hard to stay positive about it, especially when you realize that you're not getting paid nearly as much as you should, or nearly as much as other faculty members. And a lot of things about being adjunct is very unfair, but you do have to look at the big picture. I'm sure that's pretty hard for people who are in those positions for a long time.
Well,
but I think also in our cases, you can see that it did lead to getting full-time gigs. I think it's important teaching experience.
The thing I always come back to is because the pay is so not great, because the situation is so not ideal, that's why you're able to get that job with no experience. If it was a full-time tenure-track position, you couldn't get that job. So
right. But also for that full-time job that you're applying for, who are they going to call? They're going to call your boss there. So that also goes towards, like you said, interacting with the faculty members, getting to know your boss and other faculty members, because that's probably the second person they're going to call.
Yeah, and I think your students see that too. Your students can sense if you're just checking in to teach a few lessons and you're checking out, versus being there for them, to support them, to help guide them, to mentor them. And usually students have a big say in the job search as well. I feel very fortunate that Lucas was kind of around when I was going through the adjunct to interim to full-time position, and I know that Lucas stood up for me, and that means a lot to me, and I'm grateful for that. So I think that has a big impact on your future, for sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to totally attest to the fact that Colin was that great adjunct professor. I was really, really impressed that I went in for my first lesson. I still remember it, where I had a conversation with him in the hallway before the first lesson. And that was the extent of my involvement, because he was mostly doing marching band before that. And I went into my first lesson, and he was the first professor I've ever had, any kind, composition, percussion, whatever, that was asking me, how do you practice? This kind of transitions into his research a little bit. But he was how do you practice? What exactly do you do? How much time do you spend? And then the most important question was how do you spend it? It was really, really impressive stuff. And my first lesson was basically just practicing in front of him. And I'd never had a teacher that had done that. So that was a really solid first impression that carried over into me having a conversation in the office of one of the people that was on his search committee. And that person on his search committee was basically trying to look at him in the most objective way possible. And I was really trying to convince this guy. I was you shouldn't really ignore the fact that Colin's a great guy. You get on search committees sometimes, and these people are trying to look at the piece of paper as much as they can. But I was just kind of trying to convince this guy, you know him, it's okay. It's more of a comfortable thing. And I think that Colin's personality definitely was one of the biggest factors in him getting that job. I just wanted to emphasize that.
I appreciate that, man. I guess just one thing I want to add to that is, on paper, I shouldn't have won the job.
Yeah.
I was going against some highly qualified candidates that I thought were much more qualified and better players than myself. And I think the only reason why I got the job is because, I was able to form relationships with people while I was here. And that's a huge upper hand when it comes to the job search.
Yeah. I liked what both you and Megan, and I guess Ben too, Ben didn't say it, but Ben, you were commuting from Miami to Boca Raton for a while too, right?
It was an hour drive with no traffic, but more realistically, it was 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I mean that's and I can give my own story of having a grind to survive. Teaching 25 hours on the books, jazz band, 2 music appreciation sections, all the percussion stuff, the technology class, music history. There was a time that all
Casey.
Yeah, it was nuts. There was a time that all fell together, and it was really hard, but you just learn so much. And yeah, whatever. I mean, it seems like I hear over and over and over everyone's first story involves some kind of unrealistic grind that they have to survive. And I've heard it from, a lot people more, bigger named than all of us and much more experienced, and that they talk about their first gig, and they say, I describe my first gig, and they say, that sounds just like my first gig. So it's the people that say what, I have a terminal degree, I have to share an office, this is ridiculous, that don't make it, and they don't get promoted, and they don't go from adjunct to instructor to yeah. I think it's
I totally agree, Casey. I mean, it's almost a rite of passage, it seems like, nowadays. We've all kind of gone through it, and it makes you appreciate and cherish when you finally get to a place where you're satisfied and happy with it, you know?
Yeah.
And it gives you a good perspective, because then you can, you know, if you're eventually a department chair or in the position to make a decision about that, you know, hopefully your experience, you know what it's like to go through that, and you can, you know, treat your colleagues who are going through that.
Or you just skip all that
experience.
and become the president of the United States. Just like skip. I guess that happens sometimes too. Ben, I think you're gonna dig into some of Colin's.
Yo, real quick, actually, I was just thinking, like, can anyone here name someone that like did get a terminal degree, never did any sort of adjunct teaching or anything, and then just like landed that full-time job? Like, I don't think that exists.
Not anymore, I don't think.
Yeah.
Jihei.
Did she?
I think so.
I
Yeah.
believe it.
Okay. Yeah, is that right? I have no idea.
There's one, and it's Jihei Jung.
She's a freak, too. Freaks
Yeah, she
are excluded.
deserves it.
That's okay. But anyway, yeah, well, because you know, it's been mentioned a couple times, I thought about trying to summarize it and sharing it with everyone, but I'll just let Colin do it because he's here. Colin, can you tell us about your research that you did on the 10,000 hour rule? And I thought like the title was a little bit deceptive in a good way of your dissertation, because you didn't just focus on that 10,000 hour rule.
Yeah.
But yeah, could you share some of your sort of findings with that?
Please.
Yeah, for sure. Just a little disclaimer, the title wasn't totally my choice. That was a committee suggestion. But
Gotcha.
Anyway.
It hooked you,
so
but then it brought you into more stuff. I liked it.
Yeah. So if you're not familiar with my dissertation project, essentially what I did is over the course of 3 years, I interviewed 36 percussionists, all about their practice habits. Everything from how they learn a new piece of music, to practicing problem spots, to memorizing music, to performance preparation, as much stuff that kind of tapped into what they did in the practice room as I could. Really, the inspiration came from a conversation I had with a former teacher, Robert Citroma at North Texas. And in a lesson with him, I just asked him one time, you know, Doc, you've taught a lot of phenomenal students, many of which have gone on to do really wonderful things. In your opinion, what made those students different? What separated those upper echelon students from the rest of the student body? And he just told me that they practiced more than everybody else. That was it. Yeah, a few of them were very talented coming in, but they weren't exempt from this. They just worked their butts off. So that was really inspiring for me to hear, and so I started practicing a lot harder. But I got to a point where I was putting in a ton of hours, and I was kind of questioning, is this worth my time? Am I doing it right? How do the masters practice? How does the Michael Burritt of the world, you know, the Mark Fords, people that I really looked up to, how do they practice? So originally, the dissertation goal was to come up with a practice formula. I wanted to figure out what these people had in common. That was my initial goal. But after 5 or 6 interviews, I quickly realized that wasn't really possible to find a set way of doing it, because people just practice differently. So instead, it became just a documentation of all the different ways that you can practice that have led to successful careers. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, and it just it samples different methods from different people, and what they have found that works best for them. And I think it's important to note that all the methods will not work for Ben Charles. You have to find the methods that work with your learning style for the given situation. So if you do read the dissertation, I hope that you kind of dabble in all the different techniques and figure out what works best for you, because there's a lot in there.
Yeah, and I think one of my favorite things about it is that you get to these sort of checkpoints in the dissertation almost, and Colin has like a list of like, do you feel frustrated because you're running out of time right before performances? Try this. And he has like, it's broken down very clearly with like a bunch of different scenarios for like, if this is your issue, maybe try this. But yeah, I thought that in reading it, all the methods were very different, but there were some like very clear underlying similarities. One is that everyone was very methodical about everything. And the other is that everyone was, you use the term like goal-oriented in a different way in your paper, but like everyone was goal-oriented about things. Like they weren't just going in and sort of randomly experimenting. And you said like not everything, not every process will work for everyone, but I think that if you pick a process and stick to it at a certain point, you'll find which one works best for you. But they're not constantly changing around.
Yeah.
And in reading it, like the one thing that just like really, really stood out to me is I've had students. I use the Mark Ford book for my younger marimba students, and Colin, I'm guessing you do too.
Yeah.
For example, the one I start most people on is called Cane, and Cane is 2 pages long. I don't know, maybe 40 measures, something like that. And some people will work on Cane all semester long, and at the end of the semester they can basically play it, but it's it's like it's 40 measures, and I kind of think about like, well, if you learned 3 measures a week, that's less than 1 measure a day. By the end of the semester, you should have this perfected. So
Yeah.
I think that some people have trouble like finding those realistically achievable goals and just try to get the whole thing all at once, which clearly doesn't work. So that was kind of like a enlightening moment for me when I was reading.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think process is the most important thing. And you're right, that was a common trend with all the people I interviewed. I think process is very powerful for a few reasons. One, it eliminates motivation almost. I think a lot of us are usually pretty motivated, self-motivated, but students aren't always that way. And so I think if there's a process, it kind of takes the motivation out of it almost. You just have to get in there and you follow the process and you do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm a big advocate of practice schedules to where you practice the same time every day as if it's a class. You go to your harmony class at 9 a.m. on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Then you should practice snare drum from 10 to 11 on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I think process is huge. And then also just because it makes you efficient. You're not just wandering aimlessly, but you have specific goals and the next step. Once you complete this, and you go to the next step and so on. So I totally agree, Ben.
Yeah, and then I think there was maybe a Facebook question about this, but I'll just go ahead and ask it. Basically, all the questions that you asked all these people, now that you've done the study, now that you've gotten a full-time job and all that sort of thing, what are your answers to your questions? Like, what practicing process do you use? Do you have pre-concert rituals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, I think the dissertation has been most useful to me myself. I'm really glad that people are reading it and learning from it. But I just feel really fortunate to have learned firsthand from 36 percussionists who I admire. I try to use a little bit of everything, and I find myself, especially if there's a method that doesn't really click with me, I suggest it to my students. I think a lot of students get frustrated because they swear they're putting in the hours and things aren't progressing like they feel they should. And so it's nice as an educator to say, well, why don't you try it this way? This method didn't work for you, this one didn't work for you, try it this way.
Yeah.
And finding, again, the process that works best for you. But, for me, the biggest thing, if I had to pick one concept that kind of clicked with me, is that when I looked at the practice hours of everybody, it was shocking to see how the hours dropped off once they started their career. And I think that's something you don't realize as a student, is that you, as a student, even though you're busy, that's the most time you're going to have to practice your whole life, except for maybe when you retire. And so to give you an idea, the average hours during a graduate degree was, I think, 5.4 hours per day among the 36 percussionists. And then once they started their career, it dropped down to 1.4 hours a day, which for me, when I was interviewing these masters, I was kind of shocked, hearing that Michael Bird only practices about an hour and a half a day. I don't know if that's an exact correct number for him. That's just the average, for these people. But to see these world-class players that only practice an hour or two a day, it started getting me thinking, like, how is that possible? How are these people giving world-class performances on such little practice?
What I thought when I was reading is, how is it possible Paul Rennick was practicing 6 hours a day at like 11?
Yeah, that's another conversation. But what it made me realize is that, you don't become world-class in your 30s and 40s. I think musicians think we have our whole life to get better at our instrument. And typically that's not really true. I think most of the people will say that they're trying to maintain their skills at this point. You know, they're trying not to get worse. You know, I don't have as much time to practice my snare drum rolls. I just hope that next time I touch the snare drum, they're not worse than they were a year ago, you know? And so that was a big thing for me to especially relate to my students, is that, like, you really most likely are going to kind of max out, technically speaking, when you're 21, 22 years old, or maybe if you're lucky, 24, 25 if you get graduate degrees. And then at that point, you're just trying to maintain those skills and not get worse. Now, certainly we grow as musicians. You know, I think I'm a better musician today than I was when I was, 27, finishing my doctorate, or 24, master's, But I certainly don't spend as much time on the instruments. I'm not growing as much as I was. So just as a student, knowing that there is a kind of expiration, and you got to work your butt off till you hit that date, and then just try to make steady progress or not get worse after that.
Is there anything in your dissertation that is specifically related to sight reading, like how people practice sight reading?
Yeah, that came up a few times. It came up as a common way of warming up, which I think is great. For warming up is kind of a bonus time for a lot of people. It's either like technique work, or some people don't have it because they're just too busy or pressed for time. But it's kind of a time to kind of insert whatever you want in there. So I think that was a common application, was I'm going to warm up 10 minutes a day with just sight reading, and then I go into my practice session.
Yeah, something I've noticed is there almost seems to be a circadian rhythm to when the students are really prepared for lessons and then when they aren't. And it's like they all get on this loop where they aren't on the same week. And so the thing I do now, it's like, oh, you're not ready? Well, we're going to sight read for an hour.
That's awesome.
Because I was like one of those kids that just loved reading. And so I would practice sight reading all the time. And I was in a lesson and this kid was like, I hate this so much.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, we're reading music. This should be fun.
Right.
If it's not fun, you got to do it more. It should always be fun. It should be a good time and we laugh and stuff. And so I will suggest that.
One of the people that Colin interviewed was Emil Richards, who obviously is like, that's what he does. That he sight reads for a living, basically. And my first teacher when I was in high school, Don Bick, if I wasn't prepared for a lesson, we would sight read, and he would sight read an octave below me. And so, he could seriously sight read. He was one of the old Eastman guys. So that's same generation as Emil Richards, seriously could sight read, and it's just almost a lost art today, I think, for whatever reason.
Yeah. One thing that I do, and Lucas already touched upon it, is when students aren't ready for lessons, I make them practice for me. We literally spend an hour they practice in front of me, and it's not me sitting at my computer answering emails. It's very I critique them a lot, and I constantly nitpick how they're practicing, because I think that's a skilled learned set.
Yes.
A learned skill set.
As is speech.
A learned skill set. It's a lot of people I interviewed in the dissertation essentially said that it's only now, where I'm in my 30s or 40s, that I figured out how to practice most efficiently. And can you imagine if I had figured it out when I was 18 or 19 years old, how much better I'd be today? So I think all of us kind of grow in the practice room in how we do it. And I think that people need guidance on it. I don't think that it's a natural, intuitive thing. I think you have to implement certain skills and rehearse those skills just like anything else. So I think that's a good use of a wasted lesson, so to speak.
Yeah. And then one other thing you pointed out that I like so much is you said that, there's sort of a debate, and it's, just sort of generally logic that your result as a musician is a combination of your practice efforts and your sort of natural talent. And you said as you did the research, it seemed like the practice efforts mattered so much more than natural talent. And it was almost like a simply direct correlation of how many hours someone put in, and that was all that mattered. And of course, practice method would have to go along with how many hours you put in. But there's only one exception I can think of, someone that I thought was a truly outstanding musician that practiced like an hour a day in undergrad, and that's Mike D'Angelo. But
I knew you were going to say that.
The guy would practice, 30 minutes to 60 minutes a day and sound better than anyone else. But he had also started when he was extremely young. So
Right.
That's the main thing to get to, is that Mike didn't skip out on the hours.
yeah,
He just put them in before all of us did.
yeah, like before
and he
puberty.
told me that because I was very curious about that same thing, because the guy's a freak. If you've never seen Mike D'Angelo play, he's a freak on all instruments. He's kind of known for drum set, but he played Kiji softer and cleaner than anything I've ever heard from anybody.
Yeah, and I mean, bass and piano too.
Yeah, he's a freak. But he essentially told me that in middle school and high school, he did nothing but practice.
Yeah,
He didn't have friends. He didn't have hobbies. He was a percussionist through and through, all day long, every day. So I guess kind of talking about the hard work versus natural talent thing. One thing I found really interesting is one of the leading researchers on 10,000 hours, Anders Ericsson. He did tons of studies over a decade, and of all the musicians he studied, he didn't find one exception. Not one person that had achieved really, really high level of playing that didn't put in the time. So in my opinion, there's no way around it. I think over time, hard work always prevails. Initially, maybe talent will boost the student, their achievement initially. But over time, the students that were less talented will meet that student and surpass them as they kind of slowly either flatline or make very, very little progress.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question regarding that. Maybe this is in the dissertation, I just don't remember it. I know you said that it's very difficult to reach 10,000 hours after college because family comes up, job comes up, things come up that prevent you from practicing so much. But let's say someone has practiced 5,000 hours by the time they graduate from college, and then, over the next few years, let's say two decades, they accumulate 5,000 more hours, and they've reached that 10,000 hour rule. Is there any sort of research, like, will that person be a late bloomer? Does that just never happen,
Yeah, I think with, like, any piece of data, there's always exceptions.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I think what that data says is that for most of us, when we start our career, our practice hours plummet. For some, they increase. For example, John Riley, awesome drum set player, I had the privilege of riding to and from the airport with him for a day of percussion, and we talked a lot about that. And he essentially said that he grew the most once he got out of school because he had a wife that had a really great job, and he lived in New York City, and he essentially just played in the evenings and at nights, and he had the whole day to himself to just practice. And so there are certainly unique situations. But I think just generally for most people, once they get out of school, they start their career, and it's a full-time endeavor, and they're just too busy to really put time on their instrument in a meaningful way. It more becomes just prepping for the next thing I have to do, which is a different type of practice.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about this and I looked it up. It was the Tom Burra episode. I happened to take on this little thing and do, of course, just a little shallow dive. And it does seem that, there's all this commonality of 10,000 hours for all these experts. And do you guys ever wonder that sometimes this is said a little too much? A lot of the things I bumped into when I was looking into it is that it's such a pop culture thing now, when really Ericsson's research is pretty extensive and complex. And for example, to look at just the string players in Berlin, I think the Berlin Conservatory or something, I think the study did those musicians. It's tricky to use them as a control because they already made it to Berlin Conservatory, so it's not like they're just a regular person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know enough about this to speak super knowledgeably about it, but
I know what you mean. Like in general, it's hard to do a scientific study because if you're studying music at age 18 at a good school, you've already achieved a certain level of achievement.
Right.
Could
but
be
I guess
partially related to talent. So, yeah, it's hard to get that sort of scientific study like,
But
like
Casey,
a traditional study, yeah.
I think if you look at their life before Berlin, though,
they're doing it right.
Yeah.
they've put in more hours than the student that didn't get to Berlin.
Of
Yeah.
course, yeah,
But I mean,
and it does say that for sure. But I guess I'm wondering. It seems like, and I know we all agree, and we said it on that episode too. Well, it's not all about time; it's also how you use the time, and it's doing deliberate practice as opposed to the
But
whatever
I think
else
like
I think it is.
well,
Yeah.
like as university teachers ourselves, like I've never had, and I knew someone actually, Matthew Overbay kept a practice journal, and he actually like journaled until he got to 10,000 hours. But I think it was more out of curiosity for him.
Sure.
And also it's kind of an incentive to go practice. Like, oh, I've got to get up to 10,000. But
Well,
I've never told a student, okay, by the end of this year, I want to see you have clocked 500 hours or something. And so I think that it's a cool thing to think about and study. And certainly everyone that has made it, it seems, has achieved that sort of 10,000 hours. But it's not something you're going to do in a year or even 2 years or even 5 years. It's something that takes at least a decade to do. So to try and accomplish anything meaningful toward that in your undergrad, it's almost laughable because it's just not possible. But real quick, sorry, I'm almost done. But to me, it's just like, okay, so this is a thing, go practice. I mean.
So the danger there, I think, is, okay, they haven't had that buffer that, like Colin said, the Berlin Conservatory young kids had when they were younger, or that Mike D'Angelo already had. So here they are, they're in their degree, they definitely haven't put in those hours yet. And we're saying like, oh man, this isn't going to happen for you until you're like at least 30 something. So yeah, I mean, either like really get to work. Oh, and by the way, we have all these multiple instruments. So some of the stuff I saw is like, okay, look, pop culture has kind of hijacked this thing that Malcolm Gladwell hijacked from this other thing, and it's turned into like, hey, to be worth a damn at anything, you got to put in 10,000 hours, and that we know is not true. Like you can be decent at, you can enjoy a chess match casually without 10,000 hours of practice at it.
Right.
You can learn a chord wheel and play pop songs to your heart's content in not many hours. You need about 20 hours of practice to do that. So I almost wonder if it's kind of disparaging sometimes to say, I don't know, just to say this too loudly and too much. It's like, well, wait, guys, you can get your tambourine technique down, your cymbal technique down, decent marimba playing, decent snare drum playing. That is a practical endeavor. You don't need 10,000 hours on each of those, because the research says 10,000 hours to be an expert.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. It concerns me sometimes that it's such a common, I don't know, it's just said so much.
But I mean, like, I don't think that most people, and I don't know, I can't speak for everyone, but like, when I practice because I wanted to be better at music, not because I was trying to like, outdo someone else or reach, like, there's no threshold that I'm trying to get to when I practice. And I remember hearing Gordon Stout say something similar, like, and I feel like if you're trying to, get to X level, like you might get there, but you'll never exceed it. Whereas if you're just practicing with the intent of getting better.
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
Of course. I mean, of course that makes sense, but
it's sort of like, what's your motivation, I guess?
Well, and I think that's what maybe needs to be, and again, this isn't to critique Colin's dissertation, just to be clear. In fact, I think the point is that we shouldn't talk about this so casually. If you're going to talk about it right and be really clear. And of course, that's what a dissertation would do. And unfortunately, these students, you don't just say, okay, read this dissertation real quick and let's get this over with and get you motivated and on the right track. So I don't know. I lost my train of thought.
Well, I wanted to add one thing. You were talking a little bit about how you were talking about in terms of like for percussionists, 10,000 hours on triangle, 10,000 hours on tambourine and stuff like that. I think Colin actually kind of makes the argument in his dissertation that there's more transfer value there than we think that there is, because like I remember Jim Campbell talked about that a lot when he was coming in when Colin was there.
Well, and that's another reason to be really specific. Like, and I don't like that this serious research and the serious thing that is our art has kind of been pop culture hijacked, and we lose these important variances that these important details that you just described.
Yeah,
that's really, really important, because there's also something called the what the hell effect, which I believe was in my portion of Tom's episode, and that is they've of course done studies where, okay, if you're trying to lose weight and you've already eaten this much ice cream that day and you're already failing, you submit yourself to the what the hell effect and go, well, it's finally that much more, I've already failed. So I feel I've seen young people with a lot of that. They come back from PASIC and they are just mentally exhausted and they're depressed because they see everything they don't have time to do, and they suddenly think, oh man, I'll never be that on vibraphone, I'll never be that on drum set, and they're just so overwhelmed. And I don't know, I'm not saying I know what to do better, but one thing maybe isn't just put it so casually all the time.
I feel like you just gotta take it on a case by case. Like for me, when I saw my first PASIC, I was just like, I want to get better. And then I know other people that are just like you can't see the forest through the tree.
I've seen both, but I mean, I guess that's why you have to be really specific. Like we have to take the time, and it sounds like Colin is the type of person that if they'll take a whole lesson to watch you practice, good. I mean, let's advocate that type of teaching.
And I think this is also like what makes our job so complicated, right? Because we work with all of these students individually for an entire hour every single week in most cases, and like learning everyone's different learning style and matching that with what works for you, and trying to advise in that way. But everyone is different, and I think learning how to motivate students, and for some of them it's a practice journal or any of these things that we've mentioned and talked about, but I think it's just like another tool, but it's like a case-by-case basis, as Caleb was saying.
Of course, and I've said it before on the podcast, I think just an episode or two ago, we have way too many one-size-fits-all type of things we say and little solutions, and it's of course case-by-case.
I mean, I totally understand kind of what you're saying about the whole 10,000 hour thing, and I think you're right. I think it is become kind of just a generalization in a way. And it is a study with statistics, and there's always exceptions. However, I guess what I kind of always take away with it is that there aren't shortcuts. It takes hard work to achieve something great, whether it's music or it's your own private business or it's sports. And that's kind of the big generalization that I take away from the whole 10,000 hour rule thing, is that if you want to get better at this, there's not a simple solution. You just got to put the time in. And there's more efficient ways to do it, but nonetheless, you got to put the time in, And that's kind of the takeaway I give to my students, is that if you're not good at it, there's only one way to get better. Get in the practice room and work on it.
At UNT, we were all required to take drum set lessons, and like a lot of people just like shut down at that point because like, I'm not good at this. It's like, well, I mean, you only played marimba in high school. Like, of course you're not good at drum set. And that was me. And the only way to get better at it is to suffer through it and do it.
Christopher Dean, who is one of my all-time mentors, teaches at North Texas. His trademark line in lessons was, "It's not difficult, it's just time-consuming." Right. And I think that's what, some students, they do. They get frustrated and they give up, and I can't do it. I'm not good at this. Well, no, you just need to put in some more time. And, it may come easier for some people initially, but in the long term, everyone's got to put in the time if they want to really get to the top level that they can achieve at.
Isn't that one of the tenets of the deliberate practice description, is you need to be practicing the right way, and you need to always be working on things you can't already do. So, I mean, isn't that another example of, we don't just want to say, hey, you got to put in the time. We have to say this thing that's more specific. Because I guess the thing that they say people are at risk of is like, okay, I need to put in the time, and they just focus on the time because 10,000 hours sounds so great. So all they do is like, okay, well, I'm going to go do this over and over and over, even though they can already do that. Whereas deliberate practice says, no, don't do what you can already do. You need to work on what you can't do. And so that you're always growing.
I agree with that. I guess what I would say to that is putting the time forms the habits, which is, I think, step number one. You do got to get in there. And yeah, you may not be efficient for the first, month that you practice 4 hours a day, but over time you'll start to realize, like, hey, if I'm in this room for 4 hours by myself, I might as well do it better than what I'm doing now. And I think it's a learning curve. It takes time to figure out what you need to do to get better.
Sure.
Learn that this didn't work, this wasn't efficient, but hey, this does, or this works better.
So I know we're nearing time here, but I just wanted to get to a couple amusing things from Colin's paper. One of which was actually basically what he just said is Christopher Dean talked about, I think of practicing like being in prison. And he said, if I'm in prison for 2 hours, I can either sit here and stare at the wall or I can get better at snare drum. Which I thought was like kind of funny. But then one other sort of amusing thing to me that I've literally never even thought about this was like the pre-performance rituals. And I know I've heard Casey and Laurel can probably speak to this, that like Nancy Zeltzman once ate sushi before a performance and had a really good performance, so now she eats sushi before every performance. Like, I think I heard something about that, and I think Gordon Stout...
I don't know that. Is that true, Laurel?
I don't know. I know
Carly
she
told
takes
me
a
that.
nap.
Carly Mason
I don't
told
know.
me. But I know Gordon Stout and Bill Mursh in your paper both said sushi. Did any of you have like some sort of like pre-performance ritual or food or something?
Do I?
Anyone here?
Oh, anyone?
I just make sure I get myself really happy. I try to get in a good mood. So even though the sound check, this went wrong and you didn't have time to do that, and there's always that. I just try to joke around with the stage hands.
I was reading some of them, and like the whole idea is that if you do the same thing every time before you perform, it can like alleviate anxiety. But like people are talking about like I do jumping jacks before I go out on stage, and to me like that like there's gonna come up a performance where you can't do that. And it's like I feel like that would call it like it's best just to do nothing, I would think, but I don't know.
Well, I mean, there are definitely people on both sides of that argument in my dissertation. People like Gordon Stout, for example, said he purposely does not have a performance day ritual for that reason. If he wasn't able to do it, he'd be mentally freaked out before the performance because, hey, I didn't get to do my usual routine. So some people purposely don't. Other people, it's a way to control the situation, and for some people that's comforting. So I mean, there's not a right or wrong way of doing it. It's whatever works best for you.
Yeah, I think it was I want to say it's Gary Cook. He actually does anchoring. So basically he uses his wedding ring finger. So basically for years he was telling us he would squeeze his finger so there's pressure every time he had like a really pleasant experience or a really calming, happy experience. So before performances, he would anchor that kind of same feeling. I thought that was kind of neat.
That's cool.
So when he would get nervous, he would have this would make.
That's what Jim did to Dwight in one episode.
Why is my mouth so dry?
He trained Dwight to crave mints to a sound, and
the Pavlovian thing.
Yeah, well, it's like a way of training your pet too, right?
Yeah, it's the Pavlov.
Pavlov.
Yeah. Well, Laurel, you have something related to things about the body, and I think something called normal variances.
I do. So, just sticking along this idea of one size does not always fit all, and there's room for individuality in these concepts. A normal variant, an anatomical normal variant, is something that occurs in the body, which is basically a difference in your own anatomy, be it, a bone or a tendon, a muscle, or even structures of some organs can be normal variants as well. So it's a difference in your form that doesn't affect basic function of your body and what it's supposed to do. But it could affect developing highly specialized function of a certain activity. So for example, they found that a lot of sprinters tend to have really long heels which allows for greater connectivity of the calf muscle, which helps them sprint better. So in my reading for my blog that I have, Laurel Black Music, there's a series there called Marimba Body, and it's this long essay series, and something I discovered recently was this idea of anatomical variants, and there's many of them that happen from the forearm down. And what interested me was, hang on, what if these variants actually affect the techniques we use and affect how well we're able to execute certain things within those techniques? So, like, as a person who loves playing marimba, that's where my brain went with this idea of anatomical variants. And, like, hang on, could some of these differences predispose you to Stevens, Musser, Burton, or traditional grip? So that's where I'm coming from with this. And my last essay on my blog is all about thumbs because that's a variant that I have that totally affected what grip works for me. So here's this little personal story, a little anecdote about me. I have really long thumbs. They're not like weirdly long, they're just long. Like, they're longer than my pinkies. Do you have them too? Yeah. I've got long thumbs. So it's great for piano. I can reach a 10th, no problem. But when I was first taught 4 mallets and I learned Stevens grip, it made it extremely awkward because of where the contact is supposed to be between your thumb and index finger. And so I had to extend my index finger in this weird way. And my teacher would be like, it just looks wrong. And I just kept saying, it's so painful. It hurts so much. And anyway, and then there was this lesson where he was just looking at me and he said, oh my God, your thumbs are huge. I was like, oh, I didn't know. So then I started experimenting with a cross grip, which is totally favorable for me because the long thumb helps with a larger interval. And I also have really bony fingers because the thumb, like all other digits of our hand, and you'll find this in my essay, along the length of our fingers, there's no muscle. It's all just tendon and, adipose tissue and stuff like that makes up the skin, but there's no actual muscle tissue there. So anything that comes into contact with our fingers, it's almost just bone to whatever is touching it. And so another reason that Stevens grip did not work for me, because my skinny fingers, it just didn't matter. Like, I think the ring, Casey bought me when we got married, is the next to smallest size you can buy, but I'm above average height and I'm average weight. So, that's a variant that I have. And here's a little bit about just thumbs in general for everybody. So I have long ones. Some people have really short ones. Caleb has short thumbs.
They're real short. Like, I'll hold them up when we're done.
Oh, yeah. You should. And then the tips of them can be really narrow or they can be really wide. And then when it comes to our palms, some people have really fleshy palms. Like, there's a lot of meat there and other people don't. And there's tons of tendons, obviously, that run from here all the way up through all the tips of your fingers. And along the side of the thumb, where the muscle is that controls a lot of this movement, it's all on the palm side. So if you look at your hand, where your thumbnail is and you follow that all the way down to your wrist, basically this entire structure from your thumbnail to your wrist, there's no muscle. It's all tendon. And I think this is actually really important when it comes to playing 4 mallets and whatever grip you're using, in thinking about working your body where muscle tissue is, because otherwise you're going to hurt yourself. So if you think about, forming a fulcrum and squeezing from the base of your thumb on the side where your nail is, you're going to develop some funny numbness and tingling there because you're just overworking a tendon, which is going to squash a nerve. Squash, it's a technical medical term. You're going to squash. It's also a vegetable, isn't it? Anyway, you're going to hurt a nerve. But, thinking about the palm side of the hand, that's where a lot of muscle is that controls the thumb and what we need for whatever fulcrum we're working with on 4 mallet grip. So That's really just about it, and I'd be curious to know about anybody else. I know Ben switched grips when he was learning, and
Trader Ben.
If you if you guys happen to, like, if you hear this idea and you think, no, Laurel, you're insane, it's total bullshit, but I think it totally makes sense that these little idiosyncrasies we have in our anatomy are going to dictate techniques for us, are going to totally make us better at some things than others, and ultimately, and hopefully help us develop a really personal sound that is just different from other people in a really good way.
Well, and some of them aren't so little and insignificant, right? I mean, didn't my brother tell us there's certain muscles in the arm that are normal variants? Like some people have extra muscles?
Yeah, I read that in Grey's Anatomy and asked your brother about it.
That's right. Well, and that freaked us out. We're like, wait a minute, some people have an extra muscle? Like one that other people don't? And
and it's
he said, that's just a normal variant.
It's an extra chop.
It is. And it's not even a question of presence or absence. It's also, like, if the muscle is there, where's the tissue? Is it centered, or is it more towards this end, near your elbow, or is it more towards your wrist? All of this has to do with something so specific as playing four mallets. There's also a tendon that some people have that 10 to 15% of the population do not, and I'm part of the population that doesn't.
Wow.
So you can spin your stick and, like, play bolero?
Yeah, so I just can't do it. It's like a cat trying to, like...
Is that why our cat can't jump? She has an abnormal... She actually is very vertically challenged. It's weird. Cats can... I mean, I've had cats my whole life. They can jump. Man, ours cannot jump. It's so weird.
She can't. She's the white boy of cats. But if you guys want to... If you want to check out this tendon, so all you do is try to touch the tip of your thumb to the tip of your pinky, and if you do not have the tendon like me, there's never a change in the underside of your arm, like nothing sticks out.
Yeah, I don't have it.
I'm not sure what I'm supposed to see.
I don't know.
Laurel, do I have it?
I can't tell.
I'm like,
but anyway, if you have it, it's really pronounced. Like if you a way to see some other tendons, if you just flex your bicep and flex your wrist, they kind of stick out like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Out of the skin. So everybody has this one that has to do with flexing the wrist forward. So if you have the tendon that is a variant, you would have something stick out like that when you touch your pinky to your thumb.
We'll have to put up some diagrams so people can see
that's
this.
cool.
Take some pictures, Laurel.
This is kind of off topic, but can you guys do this? Can you touch your thumb to your...
No.
Sorry.
No.
A lot of percussionists can do that. I discovered this in
she's touching her thumb all the way to her.
Yeah,
techniques.
I can do that.
Can you do that?
Oh, Lucas
can
do it.
Percussion techniques, and like all the percussionists, or it was like my grad assistant, and then there were like two percussionists in the class or something, and they could all do it, and no one else in the class could do it. And we were like, wait, that's weird.
I can't do that, but I can touch this thumb.
That's so interesting. I wonder if that's like you have loose ligaments or something, like so the
I don't know.
Bones can separate.
I don't know.
Cool. Well, way to go, Laurel. That's neat to know. And
It's super cool.
Get some pictures on that. I wouldn't mind ending the episode with.
Real quick, I just want to say my 2 cents to what Laurel said is, it's obvious all human beings are built differently. And I switch grips more for the sound rather than the comfort level. But I think too many teachers put a grip in their student's hand because it's what they individually play. So for me, when I start students, especially that don't really have much experience, I put all 3 grips in their hand, give them some simple stuff to play, and say, come back in a week and let me know which was most comfortable.
I think a lot of the things we talk about and we complain about in our field have to do with conveniences of teaching.
Yeah.
And I think classroom teachers have the same thing too. The way tests are a certain way, the reason you do bad multiple choice Scantron tests in your music appreciation course is because it's not practical to do that many good questions. You can't grade it. So yeah, of course, the better thing to do is the more thorough, the more thought out, the more thoughtful. But practicality wise, you can't do that always.
I think that's where we're unique, is that most of our instruction is one-on-one. or in very small groups, and most teachers don't have that luxury.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think, luckily, it sounds like you have the wisdom to know what to do for an hour a week for 4 years with someone. I think a lot of teachers don't. They don't know what to listen to anymore. They don't know what to describe beyond like, well, I was told do this and do that, and that's what I do. So that's very easy to see and critique. I'm just going to make sure you do it. It's like a very easy thing to grade.
Yeah. I guess my approach is always try to teach what worked for me as a student, and I feel very fortunate that I had a lot of great professors. And so when I say things in lessons, most of the time I have kind of a mental image or a memory of a professor saying something similar or working on something similar in my lesson.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that was nice about UNT is like we didn't just have a teacher. And like I remember Dean telling me my freshman year, he's like, a lot of what I say Ford's going to disagree with it, vice versa. But like you get to pick and choose. That's like the beauty of it.
Yeah.
Yep. And learn to be adaptable as a student. Yeah, I mean, obviously you deal with that with larger ensembles. I think it should sound and be played this way, and the conductor disagrees, and you have to be adaptable. And same thing with multiple professors is that he wants me to play this way, I want to play it this way, and he wants me to play it that way. But being able to replicate those different things is a skill set too. Being able to play in a different style or play with different phrasing and articulation, I think that's a good thing to develop as a player.
Yeah, great. Let's close this out with one more question for Colin. It's from Josh Franz, and he says, you have accomplished so much both personally and professionally at a young age. What is your next big project that you are working on? What does the future hold, and what goals are you excited about tackling next?
Well, that was very nice of Josh to say that. He's a close friend of mine, so I'm sure that's why he said those nice things. So I guess next on my agenda, most pressing thing is learning a bunch of new music for my percussion duo with Brian Bloom. We are pretty active. I mean, I don't know how active we are in comparison to other people that do things on the side, but we do, a handful of performances a year. And we've been very ambitious this time around, and we've chosen a lot of totally new literature. In the past, we've kind of like bring in one new piece and then phase out one, but this time we're phasing in a bunch of new stuff and only keeping one piece from our old program. So I'm just trying to learn a lot of music, learn a lot of notes, and preparation's a huge thing because we do live in different states, and so being able to prepare well enough to where within a few rehearsals you can be ready for performance is challenging, but it's also a fun challenge. So that's kind of the next thing that we're doing. I'm going to do a little bit of composing in the next month or so. I haven't done hardly any composing, and I want to do more of it, and I've finally been kind of forced to write something for a publisher, and so I'm excited about that.
Cool.
So,
wow. Can you tell us about that, or is it kind of hush secret?
Yeah, no, I can tell you about that. It's something that UK graduates have put together in the past called the Blue Book. It's a collection of short solos on different instruments written by percussion graduates from University of Kentucky. And so they asked me to write one, and I said yes, more as just kind of a goal for myself. It's probably going to be terrible, but I want to start writing, and it's just something I've never gotten around to just because of time or motivation. So now I have a strict deadline.
What instrument is it for?
It's for multi-percussion.
Gotcha.
Cool.
So if you have any great ideas, I have about, I think like 18 more days to write it.
Have it go. Bongo, bass drum, res. Bongo, bass drum, res. Bongo, bass drum, tom, res. Hey, well, I think that you could write good music without 10,000 hours of compositional training. Yeah.
I would agree.
I think you could write good stuff. Man, Colin Hill, thanks for joining. That was awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, sure. Guys, this was episode 81, and episode 100 is in sight. It's pretty crazy.
Wow.
That's awesome, guys.
Yay.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's been
One
fun.
suggestion for this podcast.
Sorry?
I think we should be like, this is a very like laid back, cool hang. I feel like we should be like drinking beer or something while we're doing this. Like it's like we're all in the same room together, you know?
We certainly can do it. It's happened. We've had one beer drinker so far, and Laurel, I don't know why you're not drinking a beer. I'm in my office, so I can't. But I don't know why you and Megan aren't.
Yeah,
That's true.
Yeah, no, I have no problem with that. That can definitely happen. I should start saying, like, tell my boss, sorry, I got to keep booze in my office. It's part of the podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
It's part of the atmosphere. It's important. Yeah, awesome.
Research.
Well, hey, thank you to everyone who asked questions. We had a lot of questions that we didn't quite get answered, but I think we covered most all the topics, actually. So big thanks. We have Lucas Garner, Caleb Pickering, and our usuals, Ben Charles, Laurel Black, and Megan Arns. So, man, again, thanks so much, Colin Hill. Take it easy. Catch you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. See you guys
See you at
around.
home, Ben.
Right. See you at home, buddy.
See you guys.